Two white police officers stop a black driver, unaware that they are facing their new boss, a man determined to dismantle the system of racism. This encounter will change their lives forever. What happens next will shock even the most seasoned. But let's start from the beginning. Officers Peterson and McGregor were out on their usual patrol, absorbed in casual conversation about work. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the streets. Peterson, slightly fatigued but still alert, steered the car with one hand while scanning the roads. McGregor sat lazily beside him, fiddling with the radio. "Have you seen the new chief?" Peterson asked casually, eyes still on the road. "They say he's strict, no room for jokes with him." "Yeah," McGregor replied, leaning back. "I heard he's black. How long do you think he'll last?" Peterson smirked but didn't respond, a glint of curiosity in his eyes. The area was calm, the traffic light, when they noticed an old but well-maintained sedan driving slightly slower than the other cars. "What do you think?" Peterson shot a glance at McGregor. "Let's pull him over, see if we find anything interesting," McGregor suggested with a lazy wave. That familiar sense of suspicion that accompanied police patrols stirred in both of them. Peterson switched on the siren. The sedan pulled over smoothly, causing no trouble. The two officers exchanged a glance before stepping out of their patrol car and approaching the stopped vehicle. Inside, they saw an elderly black man in a sharp business suit. His face was calm, though he looked a bit weary. "License and registration," Peterson said curtly, tapping on the window. The man, unfazed, handed over his documents through the slightly open window. McGregor glanced at the papers, nearly dropping them when he saw the name. His face turned pale, as if he were holding a ticking time bomb. He scanned the name again, then stammered, "George Wilkins. This is him, our new police chief." Peterson froze, realizing what had just happened. Officers Peterson and McGregor were out on their usual patrol, absorbed in casual conversation about work. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the streets. Peterson, slightly fatigued but still alert, steered the car with one hand while scanning the roads. McGregor sat lazily beside him, fiddling with the radio. "Have you seen the new chief?" Peterson asked casually, eyes still on the road. "They say he's strict, no room for jokes with him." "Yeah," McGregor replied, leaning back. "I heard he's black. How long do you think he'll last?" Peterson smirked but didn't respond, a glint of curiosity in his eyes. The area was calm, the traffic light, when they noticed an old but well-maintained sedan driving slightly slower than the other cars. "What do you think?" Peterson shot a glance at McGregor. "Let's pull him over, see if we find anything interesting," McGregor suggested with a lazy wave. That familiar sense of suspicion that accompanied police patrols stirred in both of them. Peterson switched on the siren. The sedan pulled over smoothly, causing no trouble. The two officers exchanged a glance before stepping out of their patrol car and approaching the stopped vehicle. Inside, they saw an elderly black man in a sharp business suit. His face was calm, though he looked a bit weary. "License and registration," Peterson said curtly, tapping on the window. The man, unfazed, handed over his documents through the slightly open window. McGregor glanced at the papers, nearly dropping them when he saw the name. His face turned pale, as if he were holding a ticking time bomb. He scanned the name again, then stammered, "George Wilkins. This is him, our new police chief." Peterson froze, realizing what had just happened. As Wilkins' car disappeared from view, Peterson nervously looked at his partner. McGregor appeared just as shaken, as if still processing the gravity of what had just happened. Their once predictable world of clear orders and confident actions had crumbled in an instant. "What do we do now?" Peterson broke the silence, his voice hollow, and for the first time in a long while, he felt the loss of control. "We should have just let him go," McGregor whispered, still staring into space. "But now? He's not going to let this slide." Peterson, trying to regain some sense of order, picked up the radio to call it in. Slowly, he reported the traffic stop. Within seconds, the dispatcher confirmed the driver's identity, adding salt to their already open wounds. It wasn't just any new chief. It was George Wilkins, the department's new head, who had only recently taken office. "We're screwed," Peterson finally muttered, lowering the radio. McGregor said nothing, too lost in thought, already imagining the consequences. Being called into the office, facing a tough conversation, maybe even getting fired. They hadn't just stopped the car. They had let their biases dictate their actions, and now their careers hung by a thread. Peterson knew he had to stay calm. Panic was rising, but he understood that if they admitted their mistake immediately and tried to make amends, there might be a chance to avoid serious fallout. "We need to talk to him, right away," Peterson said with sudden resolve. "We admit our mistake. Apologize. Maybe that'll soften the blow." McGregor nodded, though doubt still gnawed at him. The situation felt hopeless, but they had no other choice. When Peterson and McGregor finally gathered the courage to head to the department, their minds were in turmoil. They both knew that a difficult conversation awaited them, and they could only hope that their apology might prevent the worst outcome. The police car moved slowly through the streets until they stopped in front of the station. Inside, the usual bustle of work continued, but for them, this day was anything but normal. "It's time." Peterson exhaled deeply before stepping out of the car. McGregor silently followed him. They walked straight toward the chief's office, each step heavy with anticipation. The weight felt unbearable. Both officers tried to stay composed, but the tension was palpable in every movement. In the reception area, they were directed to the door of George Wilkins' office. One of the staff members quietly informed them that the chief already knew what had happened. "Looks like he's expecting us," McGregor muttered, feeling a lump form in his throat. Peterson knocked on the door. Upon hearing the invitation to enter, they stepped inside and saw George Wilkins sitting at his desk, studying some paperwork. When he looked up at the officers, his expression was serious. "Gentlemen," Wilkins began calmly, "do you know why you're here?" Peterson and McGregor exchanged a nervous glance before Peterson stepped forward. "Sir, we want to apologize. We made a mistake. We shouldn't have stopped you. It was an unjustified action on our part." Peterson's voice trembled, but he did his best to hold firm. Wilkins let the silence linger for a moment, his gaze sharp and cold. "I know exactly why you stopped my car," Wilkins said evenly, his tone calm but with a dangerous undercurrent. "This wasn't a routine check. It wasn't about my documents. It was about who I am, the color of my skin." McGregor opened his mouth as if to protest, but stopped himself, realizing that anything he said could make things worse. "I've seen this too many times in my career," Wilkins continued, rising from his desk and approaching the officers. "Your behavior is a product of a system, and you're not the first to act this way. But," he paused, looking directly into their eyes, "I'm here to change that system." Wilkins's words hung in the air, cutting through the tension. Peterson could feel sweat trickling down his back. McGregor stood, head lowered, knowing resistance was futile. "I'll give you a chance to make things right," Wilkins said, returning to his desk. "But it won't be easy. I intend to change how you work, and that applies not only to the two of you, but to the entire department." After their meeting with Wilkins, Peterson and McGregor walked out of his office, burdened by the weight of what had just transpired. They exchanged silent glances, knowing that this situation had reached a critical point. Peterson was the first to break the silence. "What now? Do we just wait for him to make his move?" His voice was low, almost defeated. McGregor looked at him, his expression grim. "I think we're beyond changing anything. He's given us a chance, and now it's up to us to deal with it." They both understood that this was more than just a formality. Wilkins was using their incident as a lesson for the entire department. This wasn't simply a warning. It was a sign that times were changing, and the old ways of doing things wouldn't work anymore. Peterson sat heavily in the officers' lounge. His thoughts raced. For years he'd settled into a routine, patrolling the streets, pulling over suspicious cars, writing tickets. But now he was starting to realize that many of his actions may have been influenced by biases he hadn't even noticed. "We need to seriously think," Peterson said, not looking at McGregor, "about how we do our jobs, about how we see people." McGregor nodded silently. They both knew that from now on, every step they took would be under scrutiny. A few days after the incident, the correction that Wilkins had mentioned began to take shape. Mandatory training on preventing bias and racial discrimination was introduced throughout the department. Like all officers, Peterson and McGregor had to attend sessions that delved into uncomfortable truths, forcing them to reconsider their everyday actions from a new perspective. They learned about systemic issues in policing and how everyday decisions could be unconsciously shaped by bias. In the early days, there was a lot of grumbling among the officers. Some complained that it was a waste of time, a punishment for a single incident. But Peterson understood that this wasn't punishment. It was an opportunity to recognize mistakes and change how they approached their work. As they went through the training, Peterson began to see how deeply ingrained his usual patterns of thinking were, how they had shaped his decisions. McGregor was changing too. After one session, he admitted to Peterson, "I never thought about how we might affect people. I thought I was just doing my job. But now I realize we've been doing a lot of things wrong." Peterson agreed. They both knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But after meeting Wilkins and going through these training sessions, they had become different people. Weeks passed since Wilkins took over the department, and the changes became evident. The police force, once governed by routine and long-standing norms, was now undergoing a transformation. Officers were openly discussing new approaches to their work, and the topic of racial justice became central to these conversations. Peterson and McGregor found themselves at the heart of these changes. Peterson, once confident in his methods, now questioned each decision he made. His daily patrols took on a new meaning. He could no longer stop a car based on a hunch. He felt responsible for every action, knowing that each patrol was a chance to prove they could operate differently, fairly, and with greater awareness. "It's a strange feeling," McGregor admitted one day during their shift. "I used to never think about these things. Now, every time I see a car, I ask myself, why do I want to stop it? Is there a real reason?" "Same here," Peterson agreed. "But that's the point, isn't it? We need to be better. We need to see people, not just the color of their skin." This time, they patrolled the streets with a different mindset. Each day felt like a test of their personal and professional growth. The atmosphere in the department had shifted too. The old ways of policing were now under scrutiny, and Wilkins didn't miss a chance to remind everyone of the necessity of change. One day, Wilkins called a department-wide meeting. His voice was firm, but there was a quiet wisdom in his words that commanded attention. "I know these changes are hard for many of you," he began, addressing the gathered officers. "But we can't ignore the problem. This isn't just about how we do our jobs. It's about how we live and interact with the community. Justice starts with us. If we turn a blind eye to our own biases, how can we expect justice from others?" Peterson listened intently, feeling a growing resolve to embrace these new principles. He knew that past mistakes couldn't be corrected overnight, but each step they took could lead to a better future. After the meeting, Wilkins approached Peterson and McGregor. His expression was serious, but there was no hostility. "I've noticed changes in both of you," he said, looking them in the eyes. "It's not easy, I understand that, but it's moments like these that show who we truly are." Peterson nodded slightly, feeling the weight of Wilkins' words. "We're learning, sir," he replied, "and we're grateful for the chance." "Good," Wilkins said, his tone softening. "But remember, this is only the beginning. What you did to me was a result of a system that's been in place for years. Now, you have a chance to change that system. Make the right choice." Wilkins' words resonated deeply with both men. They no longer saw their actions as routine, but as a responsibility to drive change. It was only the first step, but now they understood that every patrol, every decision, was an opportunity to be better and more just. The story didn't end with a grand victory or dramatic conclusion. but with a quiet, profound transformation in each of the participants. Wilkins had shown them a path to a new reality, where prejudice and fear gave way to awareness and fairness.